Let's jump into some details on the design, permitting, and construction of an ADU. Before we start, I want to throw out a concept to chew on, which is that ADUs are the only form of housing that turns homeowners into developers. So ADUs are getting built one-off by homeowners. And even the smartest, most well-capitalized homeowner, has never built a unit of housing on their property, nor have they built a unit of housing anywhere. So we're going to go through the step-by-step of how you design, permit, and build an ADU. But I want to leave you with this thought because homeowners need support throughout all three phases of this process because they've never done it before. And also, they're an important constituency because these are the folks that are building the units. So if we want to see an increase in ADU production, we need to provide homeowners with the resources for them to execute these projects, particularly those that may not be as well capitalized or sophisticated. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into ADU affordability programs. So the general phases and timeline for producing an ADU are as follows. The design is the first phase. It can take anywhere from 1 to 5 months. Some of that can be shortened through some innovations that we'll talk about later, standardized ADU plans that some cities are issuing, modular, those sorts of things. But generally, depending on the level of design you're incorporating into your project, you're looking at 1 to 5 months. Once you have the design, you then submit it to the city for permitting. And that usually takes the city some time to receive those plans and to review them. And then you get into a back and forth with the city and various departments along the way, which can typically take about 2 to 6 months. And you're paying fees along the way. So if you're the homeowner, you've already paid the fee to your architect to get the plans drawn up. You've submitted those plans. You're going through the permitting process with the city. You're paying fees to the city all along the way. And the culmination of the first two phases, the design and permit, is the permit issuance, at which time you pay another fee to the city typically. So at the conclusion of phases 1 and 2, you have a full set of construction drawings prepared by your architect and engineer, and you have approval from the city to build that ADU. And at that point, you've already expended a lot of money, pre-development costs on architecture, engineering, permit fees, stormwater management calculations, and so forth, before you even start to build it. So homeowners and policymakers should keep in mind that there's a lot of costs, pre-development costs, that homeowners bear before you even get into the construction process. That construction process, depending on the typology and the size and location in hillside or flat ground, can take anywhere from 4 to 16 months. And later in this presentation, we'll do a sort of time lapse of a project we worked on showing the actual timeline from start to finish. People often ask, well, what does it cost to build an ADU? So here's an example budget of a new construction 600 square foot ADU. Let's go through some of these costs. In order to know where the ADU is going to be built, you'll need a survey. That typically costs about $2,000. If you're doing a conversion of a garage or an existing space, you won't need a survey because you're building on an existing structure. Design and permitting assistance, that can range depending on whether you're doing sort of a boutique ADU or a less fancy ADU, but I think about $10,000 is a good placeholder for design and permitting assistance. You can also, in California, use a draftsman to prepare the plans, and that can save you some money, although they're not architects, and that comes with some risks in terms of the quality of what you're getting and the design quality. I have worked in the past with draftsmen, and it was not worth the cost savings to deal with the lower quality of design. So I don't generally recommend it, but for those folks that are on a budget, you can, in most cities, use a draftsman instead of an architect, which will save you a little bit of money. You also need structural calculations and engineering. So you'll need to pay an engineer about $2,500 to prepare those for you and coordinate with your architect. If you're in a hillside zone or a liquefaction zone or a flood-prone zone, you may need additional structural engineering, which can get very costly and is one of the factors we'll talk about in a minute that affects time and cost. In California, you need to do a Title 24 energy calculation where they calculate the energy usage of the ADU. That can run another few $100s. You can earmark about $5,000 for permits. And the construction here, I'm estimating, again, for a 600 square foot new construction, at $275 a square foot to build, which includes all the appliances, HVAC systems, fixtures, finishes, and utility connections, which we'll talk about soon and is important. That total construction for a 600 square foot new ADU is about $165,000. So all in, you're looking at about a little more than $300 a square foot, about $185,000 to build a unit. Now, there's lots of changes happening in supply chains and materials right now that are affecting cost and labor shortages and those sorts of things as we record this, which is affecting time and cost. But this is a pretty good snapshot and a ballpark to consider as you consider an ADU, and also for policymakers as you try to understand how to provide assistance to homeowners, financial assistance to get through this process. What are those factors affecting time and cost? One is the type. So we went through those typologies earlier. So converting an existing structure is generally less expensive than new construction because you're able to use the existing foundation, walls, roof systems already, hopefully, if you're doing a conversion. Although sometimes the quality of that is low and it needs to be replaced. But generally speaking, it's less expensive to do conversions than it is to do new construction. That is also part of why garage conversions of other space have been so prevalent in Los Angeles, is it's less expensive. Another factor affecting time and cost is site conditions. So if you have sloping sites, if you need to demolish some existing structures, if you need to relocate utilities, those can be costly. If you're converting a structure, like I said, if you've got to replace any of those existing systems or not, that's going to affect time and cost. And legalizations is a wild card. We've worked on legalizations that were actually almost as expensive as building new construction because we had to go and undo so much work of the prior owner who had constructed an ADU that was not to code. And even if it had been built to code, the inspectors from the city who are re-inspecting this new ADU will want to see what the plumbing looks like and the electrical look like, and if there's insulation, and if there's footings, the concrete walls essentially under the surface, if those exist. So in order to show the building inspector the existing utilities and HVAC systems, you're gonna have to pull down walls, and depending on what you find, it may increase time and cost. So legalizations are a little bit of a wild card. Another factor affecting time and cost is the quality of the finishes and fixtures. And then another one that's varies city by city, but depending on whether or not you want to separately meter the ADU, you're gonna have additional costs. So typically those utilities are electricity, water supply, and gas. You also need to connect it to the sewer system, but most cities do not charge a fee for that. How do you finance an ADU? This is a topic that a lot of people are asking about and interested in. Here's 4 ways that most homeowners that we've worked with finance their ADU. The first is cash. It's the easiest, it's the cheapest. There's no bank involved that's doing draw requests. So some folks that have the ability to pay cash for ADUs, especially the less costly ones like conversions, this is a good bet for you. Another one that we're seeing a lot of is a home equity line of credit. That's basically a loan that a bank will give you that's secured by the value of your house. The benefit of this is you only draw down from that line of credit what you need, kind of like a credit card, a low interest credit card. A lot of folks are doing a cash out refinance, especially in these rapidly appreciating markets. That's when you refinance your whole house based on the new valuation. And typically you will be able to take out some cash of that process and use that cash you've taken out in order to build that ADU. All 3 of these are unique in that they're essentially cash in terms of the homeowner's interaction with the architect, designer, and contractor. The last one is a construction loan. We've worked on a couple with a construction loan. On the one hand, there's a benefit to the homeowner, which is that they don't need to come out of pocket to pay for the ADU. However, when you get a bank involved, there's lots of requirements, and the bank will want to come out and send their own inspectors at various stages of the process to confirm that the draw you're requesting from the bank is legit, and that adds time and cost and delays. So the first 3 are easier, but the 4th one, construction loan, is a good bet if you don't have the cash on hand to build an ADU. These construction loans are also being rolled into a lot of the affordability programs that we'll talk about later in the course. We talked about utility connections, and here's a key point about building an ADU. The permit that you get at the end of the design and permit phase is a building permit to construct the ADU. But because ADUs typically do not come with what's called MEP plans, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, where those connections happen are determined in the field. Okay, and like I said before, these are the four main utility connections: water, electricity, gas, and sewer. So your building permit says nothing about where the gas line, water line, sewer line, and electricity lines go. That has to be determined in the field. And because you are physically connecting an ADU to the primary structure for the water, electricity, gas, and you're connecting the ADU to the street for the sewer, there's lots of disruption that's going to take place on your property. So here's some photos of a few projects we worked on when we were installing the utilities. On the left-hand side, you can see this pile of dirt that was excavated that was about 5 feet high and took up half the driveway when we were adding gas, water, and electricity. Sometimes the disruptions can happen in your front yard when you're running the sewer line from the ADU to the street where the main sewer line is located. So in the middle photograph, you can see the disruptions to this homeowner's front yard that we had to do. And then the last photo on the right is showing where those utility connections were then repatched afterwards. So utility connections are an expense. They're not included in your building permits, and they generally need to be figured out in the field. So anticipating as best you can where these might go with a contractor before you begin construction will really help you keep time and cost down during your project. And finally, wanted to show a case study. This isn't my favorite design, but it was a great project. The homeowner was really happy with it. And you can see here the various steps of the project, from when we demolitioned an existing shed that was attached to the garage, to building the foundation, framing up the ADU, adding the roof and sheathing, installing the windows and weatherproofing, stuccoing the outside, and painting and finishing it and patching up the utilities. So this project took about 15 months from start to finish, and it cost about $205,000, which is about $300 a square foot, which was that target we talked about previously. So now that we've gone through the design, permit, and construction process of ADUs, let's talk a little bit about ADU affordability and incentive programs that are helping bring the benefits of ADUs to people irrespective of their income levels.